Okay, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for tonight's hybrid meeting and presentation with the Los Alamos Mountaineers. Before we get started, I want to make sure everyone is aware that this presentation is being recorded. I am Beth Courtwright, the Operations Manager at Pajarito Environmental Education Center, or PEAC, here in Los Alamos, New Mexico, and I will be the moderator for tonight's talk. I do want to acknowledge first our wonderful members and donors, and also the members of the Mountaineers for all their generous support. And for more details about other PEAC programs, you can visit peaknature.org, and the Mountaineers website also has lots to offer as well. I'll pass it over to Clarissa to start the Mountaineers meeting.
All right, thank you, Beth. So today we are going to have an update for our 70th anniversary celebration, our trip reports and upcoming trips, and then our main presentation.
Hi, I'm Jean Dewart, and I'm representing the 70th Anniversary Committee. Cecile James, Sylvie Adam, Melanie Hand, and myself, Bill Podorsky, and the artistic community of the club, Patty Walls, Mary Thompson, and Melissa Bartlett. All of these folks have contributed. We're very excited to celebrate 70 years of outdoor adventures, and we hope that everyone in the club and our pals in the community who haven't joined the club yet, we hope they participate too. Many of our activities will be on the weekend of September 17th and 18th, but there'll be some scattered throughout September as well. We're going to have on Saturday, September 17th, we're going to have a big picnic at Urban Park. We're going to have enchiladas, and we're going to have desserts and drinks, and we'd like people to come and bring a side dish and their camp chair. The activities we're going to have include hikes, canyoneering, gear demonstrations, and one of the other things that we really hope we can pay attention to as well, we're going to have a gear drive for the homeless. We haven't done that for the last 2 years, and if you have gently used camping equipment, sleeping bags, jackets, socks, warm weather stuff for our less fortunate neighbors, we're going to be collecting at Urban Park on Saturday the 17th at the picnic. So go through your stuff and see if there's something you haven't used for 5 or 10 years, and see if it could go on to another life.
All right, thank you, Jean. I'd also like to point out that some of the 70th anniversary stuff's already out there in the wild. So one of the things that you can actually go and see is our 70th anniversary mural. There's a picture of it, but yes, I encourage a hike on the Canyon Rim Trail. This is located in the tunnel there. We rented this space, and Mary, Patty, and Melissa very generously painted this for us. Thank you very much. And they did note that they had to use the topography of this spot too, and they made some mountains out of it. So I think there's some 3D relief in there when you get to go and take a look at it. The other thing is that we will have a series of articles in the newspaper. So the first article was in print on August 4th. I found the picture of it on the website too, so you can still go and find it if you'd like to take a look. Okay, so our trip report. First, I'd like to say happy 92nd birthday to David Brown. He's been a Mountaineer member for a very long time, and he celebrated in the last month. So next, I did these in order of trip by date. All right, so we have Ron, Stewart, and Tony, who climbed Jagged Mountain in the San Juan Wilderness via a 40-plus mile, 6-day backpack up the Vallecito Creek and Sunlight Creek. So in this picture, there's a summit selfie of Ron, Tony, and Stewart, and then Tony at sunrise over Jagged Peak. Then we have a couple more pictures. We have Ron crossing Sunlight Creek, and then Tony and Stewart over Vallecito Creek. Next is Canejos Lake Fork Ranch, August 10th through 14th, where they did some fishing and hiking up the valley to Big Lake and hiking in the high country. This was Bill, Mary, Dave, Maggie, Ginger, and Carl. They stayed at the Canejos Lake Fork Ranch. And Maggie said this is very beautiful. The river runs through the property, lots of hiking and rustic living, and the report back is the shower water is very hot. So feel you will be treated to hot water at least if you stay there. Very beautiful place. Next, Paul sent in 2 pictures of his slimes on August 10th. He did Lightning Peak and Gray Wolf Peak, Mount Warren, and Rogers Peak on the 12th. So the first picture on the left is a close-up of Thunder Pyramid from the summit of Lightning Pyramid. And then the selfie is on Rogers Peak with the 14er Mount Evans in the background. Mount Warren is the green hump in the foreground. Next, a good follow-on from last month's topic. France Cordova hiked Mount Kilimanjaro via the Western Breach, and that's the hardest route up Kilimanjaro. So, if you're going to do it, go for it. And she had a team of 4 people that went with her. And I think last we have Columbine Creek Trail, August 13th through 15th with Olivia and Claire. In their first picture, they backpacked the Columbine Creek Trail near Red River. They followed the creek about 2,100 feet up to a big meadow and set up camp. Very lush, but they did note that since it's been very wet, there were several attempts to get the campfire started. And then on Sunday, they hiked up the ridge to Lobo Peak Trail Junction and went east to a almost 12,000 foot summit, but it's an unnamed summit. But they had beautiful 360-degree views all around, and the photo on the right is looking north to Latier Mountains. So there's a number of upcoming trips. I think the longer term ones are full, but as was already mentioned, please keep an eye out for the local activities associated with the 70th anniversary. And as always, we are always looking for trip leaders, and anybody can lead a trip. I'm actually going to do a couple in September finally. And contact Bill Podorski, who is our trip coordinator, if you are interested. All right, so back to Beth.
Okay, before we get started with our main presentation, just a few logistics for tonight before you. And okay, so our presenter will be taking questions via Zoom chat and from our in-person audience as well. So for those of you at home, you can find the chat feature in the Zoom app menu bar. Type your questions to the Peak moderator, that'll be me, in the chat window anytime during the talk, and then I'll read them during the Q&A at the end. Please remember that not everyone in the room here can have a microphone, so there may be a slight delay when we're listening to questions from the live audience. Don't worry, there's nothing wrong with your audio. We'll be back on in a second, and we'll repeat the question for everyone to hear. The only other thing I have is that after the talk, you'll receive a short evaluation, so please do take a moment to fill that out. Your input really helps us improve our future programs. And in particular, if you have any questions that we aren't able to get to this evening, you can just reply to that email or any of the emails you have gotten for tonight and let us know, and we'll try to get those answered for you. Okay, I'm going to hand it straight back over to Rod to introduce our speaker, and I'll be monitoring for any questions or comments coming in on the chat.
Check. Good. I want to thank Kathleen. I was having a really hard time finding a speaker for this month, and she stepped up sort of at the last minute and giving a great talk, I hope, about a really good topic. So I don't know why she didn't come to me before with this topic. But anyway, Kathleen has been in the club for a long, long time, since the mid-'80s. If you've seen talks of trips that occurred long ago, like those that Bill talked about a few months ago, you probably saw pictures of a younger version of Kathleen in there. I've been on some trips with her. She always makes the trips lots of fun, I would say. So thanks for that. She grew up in Wisconsin, came to Los Alamos in the mid-'80s. She said she joined the Mountaineers right away upon getting here, and not because she had been a big adventurer before, but joining the club kind of got her into the things that she likes to do now. So let's turn it over to Kathleen.
Okay, so I'm really not that old.
Yeah, they had no child labor laws in the 80s.
All right, so the talk tonight about the 10th Mountain Huts is living proof that what happens at the hut doesn't always stay at the hut. Okay, the first thing I want to do is give a shout out to the folks who actually manage the huts, the staff members and all the volunteers who go out and take care of the huts all the time. This particular hut that we're looking at right here is not technically part of the 10th Mountain Hut system. This is one of the summit huts. Okay, and it's called Sister's Cabin. I tried to get in this hut for 3 years. There's a hut lottery system that you have to work through in order to get a hut in the wintertime. And I finally got it. It's about a 4-mile trek into the hut. It's the newest hut that is available through the 10th Mountain Reservation System. It's an 1,150-foot elevation gain, and it's handicapped accessible. Not in the winter, obviously, but in the summer for sure. This hut is quite unique in that it has a wood-burning sauna and indoor composting toilets, which is really lush, let me tell you. Okay, I'll start out with a short history of the 10th Mountain Division. A very short history. The 10th Mountain Division was formed in World War II, okay? And it was, the reason it was formed because there were 2 incidents that happened just before and during the war that showed that a small coterie of skiers could defeat a large number of troops. Okay, this happened twice, and it became big news. In 1939, the Soviet Red Army was invading Finland, and the Finns on skis, just a small number of them, defeated thousands of Soviet troops. And then in 1941, the Greek mountain troops held back much larger Italian forces, and that was in the Greco-Italian War. So about in 1939, after the Finn and the Soviet incident, Minnie Dole, who was the founder and president of the National Ski Patrol, lobbied the War Department that the United States had to have mountain troops, winter mountain troops. And the Germans already had 3 mountain warfare divisions at that time, and there was fear that the United States could suffer an attack on the eastern coast in the wintertime. Okay, here's a picture of some of the first members of the 10th Mountain Division. They started off training at Mount Rainier, and then they moved to Camp Hale, which is in the Pando Valley just north of Leadville, Colorado. The reason this site was chosen because it's a large flat valley and it's high elevation, easy access to high mountains, and the Eagle River runs through the valley, and they also had highway and railroad running through the valley. This is a picture of what the Camp Hale looked like when it was built. It was actually built quite quickly between April and November of 1942, and it housed about 15,000 troops. They practiced skiing, snowshoeing, and technical mountain climbing. They also skied at Cooper Hill, which is since called Ski Cooper, which is a lovely little ski hill just north of there. The troops actually nicknamed Camp Hale Camp Hell because apparently they had some difficulties with maneuvers at high altitude, and they suffered from altitude sickness. They had to carry 80-pound packs on skis. They had frostbite. They were winter camping without the tents. The tents actually would form condensation at the peak of the tents and drip on the guys while they were trying to sleep. So that became a problem. And unfortunately for them, there was also something called the Pando Hack, which was caused by all the coal smoke that was around. And they didn't have much in the way of entertainment. And Leadville, which apparently was quite rowdy at that time, was off limits. This is what Camp Hale looks like today. The camp was actually disassembled by German POWs right after the war. That must have been an interesting time. It's a National Historic Site run by the Forest Service. All that's left is a few foundations and some remnants of roads. And there's some plaques around that you can go and read as you walk. As you walk around. They've had to do asbestos abatement. There is the chance of unexploded ordnance being around, so you got to kind of stick to the roads if you can. And there's also underground piping and sewers that hasn't been taken care of yet. These are two memorials to the 10th Mountain Division veterans. The first one on the left, let's see, is in Vale, and it's a very nice statue showing the soldiers in their winter garb. This one on the right is the 10th Mountain Memorial at Tennessee Pass, right at the entrance to Ski Cooper. And it has all the names of approximately 1,000 men who died during World War II and were part of the 10th Mountain Division. Okay, there are many huts in Colorado, and the particular huts that are reserved through the 10th Mountain Division Hut Association are the actual 10th Mountain huts. There are 8 Brown and Friends huts, 5 Summit huts, 1 Grand hut, and 6 privately owned huts. There's also a San Juan hut system, a Weston Pass hut, an Opus hut. The picture on the right is of a hike near the Opus hut that Bill actually led. Was a lovely time, but it was raining almost the entire time. Made it interesting and very wet. Okay, and then this particular hut is manned by a person who does the cooking for us. Okay, and before the trip, Bill had said, we have one person who can't have sugar. We had one person who is gluten-free. And then there was some other thing. I think somebody was a vegetarian or something like that. So we ended up with marginally bland meals for a good bit of the time, but it was edible. There is something called the Colorado Hut and Yurt Alliance that lists more huts if you're interested. Booking the huts through the 10th Mountain Division Association website requires, for the winter huts anyway, going to the reservation lottery for the following winter. So on Valentine's Day of this year, I had to try and get a reservation for next year. So what I do when I put in my reservation request, I usually say I want a hut between this date and this date. I want it for 3 nights. I want the entire hut, and I want, my first choice is this hut, and then second, third, and fourth, and so on. And I've been able to get a hut every time that I've tried, which is wonderful. The more options you give them, the better choice you're going to have, or the better chance you're going to have to get a hut for the winter. And you get notified in March if you are selected to have a hut, and then you're charged for the reservation. The reservation is usually right around $2,000 for the entire hut. Right now, the Hut Association is requiring that you do rent the entire hut. That's because of COVID. In fact, in 2021, I actually was able to get a credit for my hut reservation because we chose not to go because of COVID. After the winter lottery's over, there are options to get summer dates, spring, fall dates, which are also quite nice. I'm mostly going to talk about the winter hut trips, but right now let's look at what a map looks like. This is a summer map. The summer huts, the summer routes and the winter routes are somewhat different. Let me see. I did it wrong. Hang on. This particular map, which isn't great, but it's decent. The winter route actually goes up this way through McAllister Gulch to Fowler Hilliard Hut. The summer route goes through Camp Hale and then up this extremely rocky road, okay, all the way up here, and then you do a 180 turn and go to the hut. When we were driving up, and most of the huts you're able to drive to in the summertime, okay, which is really nice, but some of the routes are actually called extreme 4-wheel drive. I don't normally do those. those you can walk up, or if you have somebody who has a pretty good four-wheel drive, they can drive your stuff up, and then you can just hike up with a day pack. Let's see. They don't allow dogs at the huts. So what happened on the summer route here, Annetta and her son were driving their van, and they had a bike rack in the back. And very unfortunately, the road was so rocky and bumpy, their bike rack fatigued and broke. So all of a sudden, their bikes were laying on the road, which was terrible. But at the same time, it was kind of funny. They stopped right away. Okay, I mean, nothing other than the bike rack was injured, so that was good. And then they had to cram all the bikes inside of their van, which was also interesting. Yeah, and then as we went further along, all of a sudden, I was driving behind them, and their back cupboard opened up, and a bunch of the stuff in there just spewed all over the back of the van. And Annetta had to crawl over the bikes to try and close the cupboard to stop it from getting all over the place, worse than it actually was. When you go onto the Hut Association website, this is what their Google Maps planning map looks like, and this shows the location of all of the huts that they reserve. The huts that I started out at, let me see, hang on, I'm trying to find where I'm at. Here's Leadville, okay? A lot of the huts are kind of clustered around Leadville. And this, although you can't see it very well, and I can't make this bigger, is Turquoise Lake. Turquoise Lake is a large lake that's about 4 miles long. And for several of the huts, you actually have to skirt Turquoise Lake on skis or snowshoes to get to the actual trailhead. One winter, as we were going in fact, it was like the first hut that I went to. Me and my buddy were the last ones. We went up to a T in the road right before getting to the lake. And unfortunately, we turned left instead of right. So we ended up going about 3/4 of a mile with our big old, 30, 40 pound packs and skis in the wrong direction before we figured out that, yeah, you're not very bright, are you? Okay. The Ascent ranges are from 1 mile to 11 miles. 11 miles is quite a tug. A lot of that is fairly decent, nice, not too steep, but in general, you're going to have quite a bit of elevation gain. The elevation gain, I said it was 1,000 to 2,500 feet, but it's actually, there's one set of cabins that are only a couple of 100 feet. And that I'll show a picture of some kids going up to that cabin in a little while. Yeah, you can go from a gentle slope to a very steep slope. So skins are necessary, even though others may tell you you don't need skins to go on this trip. We had a couple one time come up from Albuquerque, and they were told they didn't need skins, and they spent quite a bit of time sidestepping and herringboning with a big old backpack trying to get up to the hut. You need to get out and practice a little bit, okay? In fact, last time I went out practicing on skis was 2017. I'd gotten new knees before that, and so I was snowshoeing most of the time. And I thought, oh, it's time I get back on the old skis, right? So I get on the skis. I'm over at Cañada Bonita, and I'm coming back. And you know how sometimes on that last slope, it gets a little icy? Well, I went down, dislocated my shoulder, broke my arm, and so I had to get somebody else to take over that hut trip. That was Dennis Brandt and Don. They took over and took care of the hut trip for me that year. Sometimes it gets to be wind blowing and a whiteout, and shit can happen, excuse my language. So one year we were going up to the Fowler-Hilliard hut, and a couple of people in the whiteout missed the last turn, which was about a half mile from the hut, and kept going straight. And, you know, of course, it's cold and windy and it's getting dark. And unfortunately, they had walkie-talkies and the batteries were dead. Okay, but fortunately they got to a spot, probably on the entire mountain, where they could call, and they were able to get a hold of somebody at the actual hut and say, "We don't know where we are. What should we do?" Right? So they got a rescue party go out to get them. So always have a buddy or two, at least when you're out. Try and have at least one radio with your team. Because even though cell coverage is getting better all the time, the radios are still the most reliable thing that you can use, even though in the mountains, sometimes the radios don't work that well either. Keep your pack light if you can. Okay, this was, I think, 2003, and we have, let's see, we have Rose Click here, and Charlie Brown, my kid, and Jonathan Dorn. Okay, so you can tell they're pretty young, right? And they were real enthusiastic about this whole trip. This is only about a mile into the hut, okay? So they got their little backpacks and they got their snowshoes and their skis. And about halfway there, they just laid down and said, "This is too hard." But we made it. Okay. Now, so here's the left picture shows gives you a good idea of crossing the Pando Valley and getting to a trailhead. Sometimes it's difficult to actually find the trailhead. Okay, so GPS is great. I didn't start out using a GPS, and that's one of the reasons why I went wrong on one of my first trips. But I take it all the time now. And on the right is a picture of me on one of my first trips, stupidly carrying my skis and a kind of heavy shovel and a very heavy backpack. I don't do that anymore. Okay, interesting sights along the way. There are actually a number of old shacks and things like that because, of course, there's been mining up in these mountains. I have no idea what happened here other than somebody just totally lost it. The trail markers are these little blue diamonds that you see right here, okay? And occasionally they get covered up by snow or by branches. And so if the trail isn't obvious, you really have to be on the lookout for those blue diamonds. When you actually, on the right is a picture of one of the huts, and it's quite steep, that last little bit. So you can tell that skins are really needed here. But it's such a relief, especially when it's snowing and windy and cold, when you finally get to the hut and you're like, yay, all right. Let's talk a little bit about avalanche danger. There is avalanche danger in almost all of the huts. Okay, most of the huts on the trail up to the hut, there is virtually no avalanche danger, okay? But we always wear beacons when we're skiing or snowshoeing. And you need to carry a shovel, and several people should carry a probe. Okay, stay away, obviously, from potentially dangerous greater than 30-degree slopes and cornices. And if you ever are walking on the snow, like on the top of that mountain there, and you hear this horrible woofing sound, you know it's time to leave, because that is a good indication that that snow is not stable. Okay, here we have one of our lovely friends modeling how to properly wear an avalanche beacon. And then blisters happen quite often. We didn't have a huge number of boo-boos on any of our trips. Most of the boo-boos had to do with the ski equipment that had an issue. Okay. One time when we were coming back down from Skinner Hut, and that was an 11-mile trek, I was snowshoeing and I didn't take care of my feet correctly. So I ended up with enormous blisters on the back of my heels. Fortunately, I was with somebody who didn't need to go too fast. So we made it back okay. The only other real issue that came up, well, there were two of them. One was a person who was extremely gluten sensitive, got sick on one of the trips and had to leave early. Another one was somebody had come up from sea level and they got altitude sickness. So they had an enormous headache. Then when you have altitude sickness, there's nothing you can do but get down. Okay, so they were there for about an hour and then they had to leave. We usually do avalanche practice, trying to find avalanche beacons under the snow or hidden somewhere in the hut. The method for locating somebody who's under an avalanche is not easy, okay? Because the lines that you have to follow are like magnetic lines, okay? So it's not a straightforward thing. Fortunately, the beacons themselves, when you're searching for somebody, are getting better and better as we go along. Okay, let's talk about what the huts are like inside. Right here is a big old pot that's sitting on a stove, and that's how you get your drinking water. You have to go out and gather snow in a bucket, hopefully clean snow, and put it in this big old pot. And then we have a strainer up here too, just to get the goobers out in case there's pine needles and things like that. That's an ongoing process. You have to carry snow in frequently. Okay, during the summer, I have to mention, most of the huts have a cistern and they have non-potable water that you can pump up for washing dishes and things like that. And you can also boil it to make it clean. You can use it for cooking as long as you're going to boil stuff. In the summer, you normally would, if the cistern is empty, you'd have to actually go to a water source like a creek or a pond and get water. And they have a big old backpack thing with a water carrier on it that you can use. This past July, we actually brought our own water and that worked out very well. And of course, you bring your own food. And if you happen to cook too much, we have group cooking when we go on these trips. And sometimes people can't figure out, do I need food for 100 people or just the 16 that are here, right? So they end up carrying plastic bags full of old food on their way down. Okay, the refrigeration consists of a cold room, or in the summer you can bring a cooler, of course. One or two of the huts or cabins have an actual refrigerator, but don't rely on that. The cooking is with propane burners, and there's a wood stove that you can, somebody actually baked bread in one of these wood stoves one time. That was pretty impressive. Okay, they've got all the pots and pans and utensils and all the eating things that you need. So that works out really well. Here's Al Boucher carrying some of the snow in so we can have water. And then our lovely friends, Jean and Annetta, are chopping wood. So there's wood heating in these huts. And of course, you can't just use the wood. You have to make sure that the next people who come have enough wood so that they can heat things themselves. Okay. All right. More accommodations. They have bunks in a lot of the rooms. They have some what they call private rooms, but of course, there's very little in the way of noise insulation in those private rooms. So what you have is you have a door, but that's about as private as it gets. They have mattresses and pillows. During COVID, they did take the pillows out, so everybody had to carry their own pillows up. You bring your own sleeping bags and definitely bring earplugs. It gets quite noisy at night with people going in and out to the potty or just, snoring like me. Okay, one little incident happened with one of the outdoor toilets a couple of years ago. Somebody went out, it was like 9 at night, something like that, and didn't come back. Yeah. So it turns out these things have a little hook on the outside, so you hook the door closed when you leave so that bears don't get in, okay, or raccoons or whatever. Well, somehow when she closed the door, the hook fell down and locked her inside the toilet. And this is the middle of winter. So finally somebody said, "Where's Yvonne?" Right? And she had been out there for about 10 or 15 minutes trying to get somebody's attention to get her out of that toilet. Okay. This is just a picture of people relaxing after a hard day's skiing. You can see it's still light outside, so they'll probably go out again. There's Dave Chamberlain, and I think that's Theo Helmstetter in the back, cooking up dinner. And here's the Joneses and Jerry Sullivan eating some lovely little appetizers, waiting for dinner. So we, one night, the folks who were cooking dinner, so we usually have somebody cook and some other set do the dishes, okay? But the folks who cooked the dinner did use every pot in the kitchen. It took the Joneses about an hour to wash all the dishes. And then on the right, you'll see Chick Keller and his son, John, and just wanted to say everybody has to help with the dishes. Okay. The first couple of times I went on one of these hut trips, Dick Upsall was the person who arranged the trips. And he didn't want to cook, so he brought along a box of wine. And he always, Dick is very parsimonious, so he always brought the cheapest wine he could find. But we drank it anyway. And over on the right, you'll see Jean gathering snow for her famous margaritas. Yeah. Every time she comes, she'll do some kind of Mexican dish for dinner and then bring some tequila. Yay. So everybody gets at least one little shot. Okay, the evenings are long in these places in the wintertime. I mean, the sun, you know, if it's January, the sun's going down about 4:30, if you're lucky, okay? So there's games to play and at the huts. In this first one, there's Jean and Chris. Jean and Chris playing Team Scrabble against Kirsten and Gwendolyn. Jackie's just looking on, and these other guys are trying to help. And then card games. Rainer Friedel is famous for his card games. And after a shot of bourbon or whiskey or whatever, things can get real interesting. He starts making up rules as we go along. We have a lot of fun with this. So one night, Jeff Reeves, for some reason, was singing. I can't remember what the deal was with that. But anyhow, it turns out he knows all the words to Marty Robbins' El Paso song. Now, most of you know this song, okay? It's about a cowboy who shoots another cowboy over a woman and then gets killed himself by a posse. So I put some of the words down here just to make it interesting. Somehow, and I don't know whose wild hair this was, but we decided it would be a good idea to act this out. Jean remembers. Okay, so the wild young cowboy was Bob Williams. Jackie Little was Felina, the girl that he loved. And then, no, I take it back. Bob was the hero. Who was the wild young cowboy? Was it Jeff Reeves? No, he was the singer. But it could have been Reiner or it could have been Dennis Brand. Who knows? So anyhow, they're going through and acting out this whole thing. You know, I guess I can't remember who the wild young cowboy was because they died right away and they just went and sat down. and watch the rest of the show. So we get to the very end, and you'll notice that one little kiss and Felina goodbye. Well, Bob's laying on the floor, okay? And Felina is right next to him. And Bob starts puckering up. And Felina says, I ain't having none of that. Felina jumps up and she says, okay, this is done. All right, and there's Bob and Cassidy Reeves playing cat's cradle in a yoga pose. One of the other entertainments we have at some of the huts is putting together a puzzle, and that usually turns into a very big group affair with everybody trying to get their licks in, putting in puzzle pieces. Okay, let me see my notes here. I think it was in 2009. In the summer of 2009, the Fowler Hilliard hut burned down. They believe it was from a lightning strike. So rather than disappoint all of the people who wanted to huts in the wintertime, they actually put up a yurt. It was a 17-foot diameter yurt. Okay, it was quite nice, but it was colder than the son of a gun. There was one little wood stove in there, and it would not put off enough heat to heat the whole place. So you can see people are wearing their jackets inside the hut. And this was our dinner table right here, and this is a pole holding up the center of the hut. Well, of course, there's condensation inside the hut, and that would all gather right at the top of the pole and start dripping onto the table. So all the time we're eating, there's these drips going all over the place. And there's Dennis Brandt looking up at the drips. Dennis and several of the other folks who slept in the bunks, which are around the edge of the yurt, when they woke up in the morning, their water bottles were frozen. That's how cold it was in that place. Okay. There's Mr. Jones playing in the snow a little bit, and Al enjoying the snow. And there we have Chick Killer and his son. I don't know if you can see his sword in this left picture, but he has a large icicle. I think they were sword fighting out on the deck. And then John was really great at tossing snowballs long distance, so that was part of our entertainment that year. And then, of course, there's the chance to make snow caves, right? This is Dave Chamberlain's daughter, I think. Is it Dave? Okay, thanks. And she had a great time that year. And then, of course, you can always do snow yoga. And there's Judy B showing us how it's done. And shoveling. There's a lot of shoveling going on at most of these huts in the wintertime. This is Gwendolyn. This was at the Skinner hut. And there was actually quite a large snowdrift that kept us from looking out the windows and getting a view of the valley below. So she and Dick Upsall and myself a little bit went and shoveled the snow so we'd have a view. And there's Jeff again on top of Skinner Hut. Why is he up there? Well, there was so much dang snow that year that he decided it'd be a good idea to ski off the roof of the hut. Fortunately, this is only a one-level hut. It's not the two levels of most of them. He did that several times and never got hurt. That's great. This was the same hut that year. So this is a little pathway that you could go along, but why? I mean, you can definitely die from that snow falling on top of you. And this is a different hut. I can't remember exactly which one it is, but we had a lot of snow that year too. A lot of snow is good and bad because, you know, if you're the guy who's breaking trail, I'd say that was big snow is not fun. Also, if you're trying to ski downhill and you don't have much of a slope, big snow is going to stop you in your tracks. Okay. Now, one of these guys, there's three guys down here. This guy in the middle, and I can't remember his name, decided to bring a sled up one year. Why did he bring a sled up? Well, he thought it'd be a good idea to build a slalom run next to the hut. Oh, we don't have any sound. There was lots of screaming. Okay, let's move forward. All right. So sometimes if there's not a lot of snow, sometimes the snow isn't so great, but we still have fun. On the right, you'll see a hike up to Hagerman Pass, and yeah, not much in the way of snow there on the trail. And here's just some pictures of people making fresh tracks. I wish I could have made these bigger, but what can you do? Yeah, really great tracks coming down here. This is Kirsten Boudreau. She's actually on a split board. So you can take a split board up there, which gives you the ability to snowboard when you're up here, and she was great with that. All right, this is one of, it doesn't look like it, but this was one of my favorite times because we got to go up to the top of this hill. It was quite a long trek and it was a ways up, but it was so beautiful when we got up there. And there's some more making tracks. I love this one. It's just great. It looks like, I don't know what you call it, a rickrack, that stuff that you sew with. Okay, this action shot on the left, you remember that one of those kids coming up and saying that a half mile was just too tough? This is Charlie, my son, 20 years later, having a great time. And then Judy and Don Creer are coming down over here. This was at Sister's Hut. It was very, very cold this past year at Sister's Hut. So people would go up to the top of the mountain, and there was a lot of snow. Didn't get super amount of fun. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention, and Patty will attest to this, make sure that if you have a water tube, it's insulated, because otherwise it's for sure going to freeze, and then you have nothing to drink, which is a very bad idea when you're climbing up a hill. Okay, one year we had a fox visit. That was pretty damn cool. And then over on the right, this is Christine. She started feeding, I think this is a jay. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. And it would come right to her hand and just eat little crumbs. This is the turn that was missed for the Fowler Hilliard hut. That was covered with snow at the time of the missing turn, okay? And then we have Stephanie and who else is there? Jean and Judy, I think. All right. So on the way down, some interesting things happen on the way down too, okay? One year as we were going down, we were going on the south side of Turquoise Lake, and it was a big avalanche year that year. We had gone to the south side of Turquoise Lake to avoid avalanche potential. But as we were going along, about halfway along the south side of the lake, and this is like 4 miles, okay, we came upon avalanche, left over from the avalanche, okay? And that stuff is hard. So I usually carry a little plastic shovel, and I'm thinking there is no friggin' way this shovel is gonna dig that stuff up. Okay, another year, we came to the Eagle River, and unfortunately, there was no snow bridge. There's usually a snow bridge here, but it was gone. So we were on our way out, thank God, got wet feet, and it was only about a half a mile to the cars from this point. Okay, and then this last one, we always have to have a picture at the end of the trail, and there we go. They look so lovely, don't they? All righty, now let's talk about the summer a little bit. Well, this is the Fowler Hilliard hut in the summer, and we came upon an odd sight. So it's about a quarter mile to get from the vehicles to the hut. All right, and they have these little carts that you put stuff in order to carry stuff to the hut, okay? And as we went over the hill towards the hut, we saw this llama. So what in the heck is a llama doing up here, right? And it turns out that the land is leased by sheep herders. during the summer, and they stay at a certain spot for a couple of weeks and then they move on. Okay. And the llama was kind of trying to prevent us from going down the road. So having grown up on a farm, I thought, well, I'll just show this llama who's boss, right? So I told the llama to go away and, go lay down and all that kind of stuff. And the llama seemed to say, okay, I'll do that, right? We got our stuff we started walking towards the hut, and the llama snuck up behind me and butted me in the butt. I was like, oh, shit. Anyhow, it turns out this llama was a protector for the sheep, which is something I had never heard of before, but it's true. Okay, and here we have a picture of the sheep herder and his dog, and here's Karen, and here's Aneta, all right? The sheep herder was from Mexico, and he only spoke Spanish. And fortunately, Karen is very good at Spanish, okay? So she talked to him for quite a bit and invited him in to dinner, and we had a very, very nice time doing the back and forth between Spanish and English. And he actually, I think, had a little bit of a crush on Karen. He tried to get her to go out with him on a date. Okay, and then the next one is just hiking. And of course, in the summertime, there are so many flowers. I think I'm just about out of time. Okay, and mountain streams, just lovely, 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 and lakes. So on this trip, this was quite a large lake. It's on the Colorado Trail. And for this hut, this is Uncle Bud's hut in the summertime. We were actually right near the Colorado Trail and the Continental Divide Trail. So we were able to go on that quite a bit. And it turns out there were quite a number of people who were out hiking on the trail. So we got to say hello and things like that. Usually in the winter, you're not going to see any other people except for the people you're with. In the summertime, you're frequently going to see other hikers and things like that. In fact, I think it was at the Skinner Hut one year. Most of us were out for a hike, and one person was left at the hut. And all of a sudden, they saw this face pressed against the window. I was like, this person had come up to the hut and just was curious, okay? But you don't want to be sitting there picking your nose or anything when somebody comes and mashes their face against the window just to see what this hut looks like. Okay, lots of lakes. And on the right, we have Charlie Strauss this summer jumping in the lake to get a bath because, of course, there are no showers or anything at the huts. And it turns out there were little leeches. Isn't that right, Patty? Yeah. Oh, sorry, big black leeches in there. Had to pick them off when he got out. Okay, and sometimes in the summertime, there's quite a bit of snow left, which also makes it interesting, especially for the kids. Okay, this summer we saw a moose when we were out on one of the trails. He's hiding pretty good over here. And then, of course, we had moose for dinner. Not really. This is our famous gourmet cook, okay, with Felicia Orth doing the cooking. Oh, and Dave Foster's in the background here. And there's Melanie and Dave Hand. Okay, here's Dave Foster. He had an unfortunate incident that year, and that when it was time to leave, he went and started his vehicle, only starting wasn't in the cards. It turns out that a rodent had got into his wiring and chewed it up pretty good. Fortunately, Dave was able to get him fixed up enough to get him back on the trail. Okay, and here's just a couple of pictures showing that we bike during the summer quite a bit, and that there's lots of great old roads up near these huts that you can go biking on. Okay, right here in this picture, this is me and Patty, okay? We're looking at this ridge here thinking, oh, wouldn't it be fun to go along that ridge? Well, it turned out you had to first scramble down these rocks a little ways to get to the ridge, and then once you got here, you're pretty much screwed. You got to turn around to come back. Fortunately, we weren't the ones who did that. All righty. And then, of course, sitting down and having lunch is one of the highlights of the day. And here's a summer trip with that same old Fowler-Hilliard sign. Okay, questions? Yeah, you can clap, it's okay. Oh, very quick.
So Kathleen, we have to repeat those for the
Oh,
people
okay.
at home.
How long does it take to get a response when you call or email? I'm assuming you're talking about 10th Mountain Hut Association. Usually a day or two. And if they're open, somebody always answers the phone. Correct. It's Valentine's Day for the following winter.
And there was another similar question. You get notified in March for the following winter's
Correct.
huts. Okay. Yes. Okay. So are there any more questions in the room for right now? Yeah, one
Yes,
more.
What's the winter bathing like? Well, you can strip down and roll in the snow, or you can use a paper towel or a washcloth that you brought and just, spit bath. No, we don't use any water that we melt for anything other than drinking. It's too much work.
Okay, we can go to one question that came in online. And yes, everyone, please still keep chatting in your questions. I'll try to keep up. Okay, first, is there information on what gear to use to approach each hut in the winter? Cross-country skis, backcountry skis, snowshoes?
Okay, in general, it's either skiing or snowshoeing. They really don't want people to use a snowmobile to get to the huts, and there's a perimeter around every hut that says no motorized vehicle can go past this line, basically. But there is nothing specific to each different hut. Okay, there is a list on their website that says these are the things you're going to want to take.
Okay, sorry, I'm trying to respond to people here. Okay, so is there anything other than firewood that you're required to leave or do or clean up before leaving the hut?
Okay, yes, you have to clean up when you leave the hut. Basically, just sweep it up and make sure there's no food left. Since COVID, we've also had to disinfect everything before we leave, just wipe it down with disinfectant, like the mattresses and things like that. Yeah, we make sure there's wood for the next group coming in. If they have to melt water, make sure that the pot has got snow in it at least, so that they have water when they get to the hut. Most people will only take enough water to just get them to the hut, and then once they get there, they'll worry about having something to drink in addition to what they drank on the way up.
Are all the huts propane powered, or do you have to have fuel for stoves?
All of the ones that I've been to are propane powered. And also the lights are photovoltaic solar lights. So there's no actual AC where you can plug something in and recharge your phone or whatever. So if you have devices like that, you have to bring your own batteries or your solar chargers, whatever you need in order to keep the power up on those items.
All right, I have a few more from online, but I want to check and see if anybody has any in the room. I don't see any hands, so I'll keep going from here. Any rodent problems that you've seen in the huts?
Yeah. So rodents, they happen. Rodents happen, okay? Especially if somebody has left some food in the hut, which I haven't seen actually on any of my trips. So they have traps around in some of the huts, but for the most part, I haven't seen a lot of rodents, although I've seen things chewed up, like, the door of the outhouse. that kind of stuff, by raccoons or whatever. But actually inside the huts, very little in the way of rodent, poop and things like that.
Okay, so I have a comment from Kyle Wheeler. She says that anyone interested in the 10th Mountain Division should visit the Ski History Museum in Vail. It's wonderful and a great source of information. So,
Thanks, Kyle.
all right, any other questions in the room here?
Well, right
The
now,
question is, when can you sign up?
when can
Yep.
we sign up for the next one? Okay, so I haven't advertised to the Mountaineers for this winter trip that's coming up, because I already had people calling me and saying, "Can I get on this trip? Can I get on this trip?" But I will probably have a summer trip that will be advertised to the Mountaineers. Summer trips are great because you can actually, in most cases, take a vehicle up close to the hut, and you don't have things to worry about like avalanches, for example, or freezing to death.
Oh, one more question in the room. Go ahead.
Are you trying to see all the huts, or do you tend to go back to the ones you like?
So am I trying to see all the huts or going back to the ones I like? Both, actually. Some of the huts are quite difficult to get to, both by, as far as getting to the trailhead with a vehicle, and also just, they might be more than 11 miles, which is way more than I want to do. And some of them just don't look all that interesting, to tell you the truth. Is there a viewing where you can look at the huts? Yes, there are pictures of the huts on the Hut Association website. So at least of the outside of the huts. All right. And then there are several books that are out which talk about the various huts and show some interior and some pictures like what I'm showing here, where you look outside and say, "Oh, isn't that beautiful?" Okay, so it gives you the history of the name and who it was for. Yes, so the huts were actually, the huts that we're looking at were actually started by veterans of the 10th Mountain Division. And a lot of them have the story of the person that this hut was built in honor of. And the huts they started out being built by people who were either veterans themselves or they were family of veterans, and they wanted to honor a veteran who had passed away during the war. So they made the donations in order to have the huts built. So right after the war, actually, a lot of the ski resorts like Vail and Aspen were started by veterans of the 10th Mountain Division. So that's pretty interesting. They actually went all over the country, obviously. They're done with the war. Went all over the country and started ski resorts.
Okay, I think that's everything that I see online. And please chat me if I missed your question. There were a lot there. And anything else in the room? Anyone else?
Yay!
All right. Well,
Thanks everybody for coming.
thank you so much, Kathleen, for sharing this with us tonight. Everyone, please remember to look out for the quick survey coming to your email. Even if you're in the room, we will be emailing you. If you're interested in attending more programs, we have some great ones coming up. We're nearing the end of Bear Month, and that means this Friday night is our Bears, Beers, and Bites program. That's like our annual bear dinner. So that's Friday night, and then the Big Bear Festival 10 to 2 this Saturday here at the Nature Center. I hope to see you there. And again, thanks everyone for tuning in and for coming here tonight in person. Thanks, Kathleen.